Welcome to part 6 of the YouTube series for Infor CRM mobile development. In part 5, we covered localizing a customization. Today, we're going to explore KPI metrics and charts. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and get mobile set up for development. So I'm not going to open Argos SDK. I'm going to go ahead into Argos Sales Logics. I'm going to open this with Visual Studio Code. And I'm also going to shift right click, open PowerShell window here, and I'm going to start the development server. So I'm going to run yarn run start. I can minimize that. Then I'm also going to go ahead and go into the Argos sample directory. And I'm going to go ahead and open this with Visual Studio Code as well. Minimize that. And I also have Application Architect open. We're going to be using that later on. So now I'm going to go ahead and log into mobile and just give a quick demo of what we're going to be covering today and go over some of the terminology we're going to be using. So since our development server is running, I'm going to go ahead and go to localhost port 8000. I'm going to go into products, Argos Sales Logics. And I'm going to go ahead and open the indexdev.html. I'm going to go ahead and press F12. This will open the Chrome Developer Console. I'm going to log in as Loopy. I'm going to go ahead and expand Go To, and I'm going to go to the accounts list. And in the top right of the list, you're going to see this View Settings cog. We're going to click that. A dialog is going to open up. We're going to expand the KPI section. And we're going to check these 3 KPIs. So you can see here it's loaded in some KPI numbers. And then when you select them, it will load a chart. Let's go ahead and inspect the network request that was used to generate this chart. So in the network tab over here on the right, we're going to look at the last request. It was execute metric. If we select that, you can see the payload, and it's for each account manager. And then there's a number that corresponds with each bar. And if we look closer at this URL, you can see there's an execute metric, and then there's a filter name and a metric name. And if we jump over to AA, we're going to go to the entity model. We're going to expand that. We're going to go to packages. We're going to go to the Sales Logics application entities. This was for account, so we're going to expand account. And then we're going to go ahead and expand filters. And if we jump back real quick, we could see the filter name is account manager and the metric name is count accounts. So if we go, there should be, here it is, count accounts. So this is an analytics metric definition. And then if you look at the account manager, this is a distinct filter. So if we want to customize this, we could actually change some of the filters that are being displayed by the chart. So for example, let's go ahead and right click this network request. We're going to open it in a new tab. And we're just going to change the filter name to something else that we have available here. So let's go ahead and select type. And you can see here, it's now grouping by the type instead of the account manager. We can also do that, the same thing with the metric definition. So here's a total revenue one. So we can go ahead, and where the metric name is count accounts, we will just say total revenue. And now it's breaking down the revenue by the account type. Now let's go ahead and jump into some code, and we'll see how these definitions are loaded by the application and how you can extend them in your customization. So if we go ahead and open the Visual Studio Code editor that we had for Argo Sales Logics, you're going to go ahead into the source folder and then open application.js. And you could see here on line 737, the line might be different depending on the version you're using, but it's called set default metric preferences. This is doing a couple things. It's instantiating a new default metrics, it's getting the definitions, and it's assigning them to our app state preferences. And these are actually stored in local storage. So if we go back to Chrome real quick, let's go to the developer console again and select the application tab. Under storage, you'll see there's a local storage section. We're going to expand that. We'll select localhost 8000, and then there's a preferences section that we store. And this is stored as JSON. And you can see down here, there's a little better tree view of it. We can expand the metrics. So here are all the metrics for accounts. And those are the 3 that we enabled. And you can see for each metric, it is saving the filter name and the metric name. So let's go back to the code. And let's go ahead and look at this get definitions. So if we go and open default metrics, here's the get definitions. And this is very similar to how we do views and how we customize them. We have a customized layout, and this one's called definitions. And it's returning an array with some children with all the definitions for the whole application. So this means in your customization module, you can register customization hooks, and you can modify, add, or delete these as you wish. So now let's go ahead and open the Argo sample editor. So I have it open down here. We're going to go ahead and open the application module. And we actually have an example. It's called register KPI customizations. And this one is going ahead and removing the average time as customer. Now let's go ahead and jump back to the metric definitions in Argo Sales Logic. So I'm going to switch editors here. And I want to explain some of the different properties in the definition. So the title is what's going to appear on the list. So that would be right here. So total accounts, total revenue, average time as customer. The query name, you shouldn't really need to modify that. That's part of the URL for executing the metric. Query args is what we explored earlier in the URL by changing the filter and the metric name. So if you want, you could find another filter named in AA that matched one you would like to use. The chart type can be bar, pie, or line. And if you expand views, charts, you can see the code for each one of those types. The aggregate function, and the code for that lives under the aggregate module. So if you see right here, it's under source aggregate, and then here's sum. And if we jump back to the application real quick, you could see here is the execute metric for total accounts. So what the sum is going to do, it's going to take each one of these value points and it's going to sum it. And that's what will get shown here. And similarly, the formatter for that is next, and that comes from the format module. So source format, here's big number. So after the aggregate runs, it's going to get passed here and formatted, and then displayed here in the widget. And then the last property is enabled, And this is going to determine whether it shows up by default for the user. And as soon as they select something, the local storage will go ahead and override this value. So once they go ahead and select true, enabled is going to be true in preferences. And we can verify that here. We'll go ahead and expand metrics. We'll go to accounts. And we can see enabled is now true. The last thing I want to cover is some of the key files involved in rendering these KPIs in the bar charts. So that way, if you need to do some advanced customizations, maybe perhaps you don't want to use our metrics endpoint, or you want to do some custom chart types, you can go ahead and do that. So if we jump back into Argo Sales Logics here, we go to source and then views. Let's just go ahead and look at the account list. And you can see here it's declaring and it's inheriting from this metric list mixin. So let's go ahead and explore this. So this is how we're hooking into the list views that have KPI metrics. So we're going to go ahead and open the metric list mixin. And you can see here in the post create, it is going ahead and creating its DOM node. And then in request data, it's going to call rebuild widgets. And rebuild widgets is instantiating the widget and telling it to request its data. And if we look at the instantiate widget, there's a special constructor function here. And this is defined up here as a property on this mixin. So if you wanted to do a dojo lang extend on the prototype, you could override this and have your own custom widget applied here. So we can go ahead and scroll down to the metric widget. And you can see here it has its own DOM markup. It has some SData store properties. And then it has some chart type mappings. And it also has a format and aggregate module. So you can use this to override the aggregate functions. And the chart type mapping here is just a view ID. So it's saying app.getView, the chart mapping type, and then the chart type passed in from the metric definition. So if you wanted to add your own custom chart, you could add your own chart type mapping and then your own view for that chart. If we go up to the views charts folder, we can go ahead and open the generic bar. You can see here's the ID. And then it has a create chart function, and it's taking in the raw data from our metric endpoint. To render the charts, we use an open source library called chart.js. And if you want to view the documentation for that, you can go to chartjs.org, and they have samples in getting started docs there. And that's going to wrap up part 6. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thank you.